Welcome back to another episode of Temple Time. I am super excited this week. It is officially March and we're digging into the goddess Inanna. And I have been reading this book, Inanna. This is Queen of Heaven and Earth by Diane Wolskin. Just kind of in preparation. And what I love about this book, I got this last week and I've basically finished it, but it actually has hymns that have been translated from Sumerian tablets. Most of these are like 3,000. No, they're from 3,000 before Common Era. So 5,000 years old, which is pretty crazy. And then reading, this has the hymns, and then it's also got just kind of excerpts from the researchers and a few other people who worked on transcribing it or translating the tablets. But what I wanted to talk about today, not only who Inanna is, but how she's kind of the original goddess, you guys. She's probably the oldest recorded goddess that we know of. And it's fascinating to me because the Sumerians, had their own written language. The fact that it's, almost over 5,000 years old kind of blows my mind. Because when I think about, we worked with the Celtic goddess Morrigan a couple months ago. The Celts they were an oral tradition. They didn't write anything down. So we actually know quite a bit about Inanna for being, as old as she is. And she kind of, I joked on Instagram the other day, I said, if Helen of Troy was the woman who launched 1,000 ships, I feel like Inanna is the goddess who launched 1,000 goddesses. She's the very first fertility goddess. And that's really what I want to highlight today. Really being the embodiment of the divine feminine herself. She was originally kind of like an agricultural goddess. She was an earth deity. It's said that, she is born from divine parents. There's always a little bit of confusion around who her actual father is. Nowhere in the myths does it mention who her mother is, but her father is either Enki, who is the god of wisdom. He's also labeled a water god, or Nana, who is the god of the moon. And she's also labeled as the first daughter of the moon. And she has a brother, Utu, who is god of the sun. So we already see this contrast. I'm getting all tongue-tied. I'm just super excited about Inanna, guys. Masculine male energy being the sun, or her brother being the sun god and her being the moon goddess, which we see a lot of, except for there's a couple of Asian myths. I guess there are a couple of female solar deities, now that I think about it, especially in Egypt. Japan, and I also think Norse has a sun goddess, but typically even in modern astrology we equate the sun with being masculine and the moon being feminine, and so for her to be the first daughter of the moon, she has so many names. She's referred to so many different things. So not only have I already mentioned that she's an earth deity, right? She was an agricultural deity, and that's one of her myths. Basically explains very much like Persephone's myth, the changing of the seasons. And I'll just go into that really quickly. They believed that Dumuzi, who was her husband, he basically, when Inanna went down into the underworld, she came back, somebody had to take her place. So she sent her husband because he was the only one who wasn't in mourning when she came back. He was sitting on the throne enjoying his good life. And so she sent him to the underworld in her place. And so she was moved by his tears. He managed to escape. And we'll talk more about the descent myth next week, the underworld myth with her sister. But basically, her husband got sent to the underworld, but only for 6 months. So they're reunited in autumn. This is the Sumerian New Year, is the autumn equinox, and that's when planting and harvest season all kind of start. Because in the summer, Sumer is in like modern Iraq. Like, it's hot. Nothing can grow in the summertime. So really their new year is autumn equinox. And so he would return at that time, go through fall, winter, right? And that was when everything kind of prospered. And that's kind of why she's an earth deity, is explaining those seasons, right? She was in mourning. She was in despair when her husband wasn't reunited with her, even if she was the one who put him there. Inanna's kind of funny. She's very much like, after reading her hymns and her myths, she's one of those who kind of just takes what she wants, to put it nicely. She goes after, she takes what she wants, essentially. And we'll see that in one of her other myths, kind of how she came to be known as Queen of Heaven. So as I was saying before, she's the daughter of, she has divine parents, but after she was born, she was sent to Earth, basically to await her throne. And so in one of the myths, it's called the Hulupu tree. I'm wondering if I should read it now. She's basically asking, like, when is my throne coming? When is my bed coming? You know what? Why don't we do that? Because this is how let me read this to you. It's not too long. This is how she becomes a goddess, essentially. There's two myths, but she finds her place on the throne. I feel like I'm rambling right now, you guys, but I promise this will all make sense. In the Hulupu tree, there was a tree that lived on the banks of the Euphrates River. And one day the south wind came up, unrooted the tree, went down the river, and Inanna saved the tree from the water. And she took it and planted it in her garden. And she waited for 10 years. She's like, when is this gonna give me? How long will it be until I have a shining throne to sit upon? How long will it be until I have a shining bed to lie upon? So the tree grows and grows, but it's not quite right. And then while she's waiting for the tree to grow, awaiting her throne, right, awaiting the bed to lie upon, a serpent comes in and makes a nest in the roots of the tree. And Lilith, the dark maiden, comes and lives in the trunk of the tree, and an Anzu bird comes and lives in the branches of the tree. So essentially this thing's cursed, and she's like, what am I going to do with this now? When is it my time? So she calls on her brother Yutu, the warrior god, and he comes and essentially cuts down the tree. He banishes the snake, and after that, seeing that, the bird flies off and Lilith leaves. And I think this is the only myth that mentions, I've seen her mentioned two ways, either Lilith or Lilitu. Lilitu is also another name for Lilith, and they referred to her in this hymn as the Dark Maiden, which I find interesting. And it wasn't, this is 2,000 years before Jewish folklore kind of picks up, right? Before the Old Testament's like being written down. So essentially then her brother carves up this tree and creates a throne for her and a bed for her to lie on. The bed is significant because she's a fertility goddess, and when her husband returns each autumn equinox, they mate, they join together, basically to fertilize the land. So that's kind of how she started, as a fertility goddess, as an agricultural goddess. And then in another myth, her father Enki, essentially, long story short, they get drunk, they have a bunch of drinks, and Enki, her father, just they're drinking beer, and each time he raises a glass to his daughter, and each time he gifts her with something else. So the first time he gifts her with her throne, with queendomship, essentially. And then he toasts her again, and this keeps occurring, and he keeps drinking until he's toasted her 14 times. And let me just find some of the things that he gave her, because this is where we get all of our goddess lore from, I feel like. And it's funny, just the things, it's an interesting read, just the words and the usage and how it's like translated. So that's what it looks like in the book. I mean, and it's listed each time. So he gave me the high priestess or priestesshood. He gave me godship. He essentially made her a goddess when he got drunk. That's how she gained all of this stuff. He gave me the noble scepter. He gave me a staff. He gave me the holy measuring rod and line, the throne, the shepherdship, kingship, princess priestess, divine queen priestess, the incantation priest. He gave me truth. He gave me descent into the underworld. He gave me ascent from the underworld. So this is a gift from her father, her being able to traverse the realms to make it out of the underworld, which again, we'll go into that myth next week. But let's see, the fifth toast, he gave her a dagger and sword, a black garment, a colorful garment, loosening of the hair and binding of the hair. He gave me the standard, the quiver, the art of lovemaking. He gave me the kissing of the phallus. He gave me the art of prostitution, the art of speeding. He gave me forthright speech, adorning speech. He gave me the cult prostitute. He gave me the holy tavern. He gave me the holy shrine, the holy priestess of heaven, the art of song, the art of elder. He gave me the art of hero, the art of power, the art of treachery, the art of straightforwardness. He gave me the plundering of cities. He gave me the setting up of lamentations. He gave me the rejoicing of the heart. He gave me deceit. He gave me the rebellious land. He gave me the art of kindness, of travel. He gave me the secure dwelling place. And it goes on and on and on. He gave me the bitter tooth lion. He gave me the kindling of fire. He gave me the putting out of fire. He gave me procreation. He gave me the kindling of strife, of counseling, heart soothing, giving of judgments, giving of making decisions. And not only is she a fertility goddess, not only is she an earth deity, once she has her throne, she's allowed to ascend back to the heavens. She's allowed to be a god, with her parents, and the Sumerians believed, they lived on Earth, right? And all of Earth was surrounded by water. Their land was all surrounded by water. And above the Earth was the atmosphere and then the heavens. So in the atmosphere was all the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets. And then the heavens where the gods reside. And then obviously under it is the underworld, right? So her father gave her all of these things. She was able to ascend. She was able to become a goddess, essentially. And that's, in that hymn, is how kind of she went from being a normal woman to being a goddess. She got a promotion. And so in the hymn, in the myth, he gives her all of these things, toasts her 14 times while he's drunk, and she just takes everything and leaves on the boat. She embarks on the boat of heaven, is what they call it. So she takes all of her gifts, all of her treasures, takes the boat to heaven. She's like, see ya. Her father wakes up, the beer has left him, and he's like, where's all my stuff? He looks around, he calls his servant. It's like, what happens? And he essentially sends his servant off to stop Inanna with all of these treasures, not realizing what he'd done while he was drinking. And 7 times the servant goes and can't catch her, essentially. So she arrives in heaven in all of her glory, and her city prospers, and, it's happily ever after. But she inspired a lot of other goddesses. So the Akkadians refer to her as Ishtar. And there are a lot of similarities between Inanna and Ishtar. So I tend to think of them as one. I tend to think of them as Inanna. Ishtar is Inanna. Even Ishtar has the exact same myth when she goes to the underworld to visit the Queen of the Dead. She has to go through the 7 gates. Again, we'll go through that myth next week for Temple Time, but the only thing that changes in that myth is her name, and it's Ishtar. And the Akkadians lived like 1,000 years after the Sumerians. And then we see her later in history pop up as Venus and Aphrodite, and then Astarte, which is how the Phoenicians referred to her. So I guess it was Ishtar, then Astarte, then Aphrodite. Aphrodite has a different origin myth, but essentially she is the embodiment of Inanna. You see her as the goddess of love and beauty and sexuality, and Inanna is very much this fertility goddess, you know, fertilizing the land, being a lover, sharing her bed with her husband to fertilize the earth. And she's also referred to as the morning and evening star. And that's kind of with her myth when they equate her to Nana, who is the god of the moon. So she's the evening star. She's Venus, essentially. She is the planet Venus. And Venus is the only feminine named planet. The rest of them are based on male deities. So she is, you know, the epitome of the divine feminine. She was also seen as a war goddess too. To me, she embodies the role of the queen so much. I mean, not only just as her title, you know, queen of heaven and earth, she rules 2 realms, right? She's also the embodiment of the lover, being a fertility goddess, being a goddess. They don't even mention fertility. They mention her as the goddess of procreation. And you'll see that a lot in the myths. And she has the ability to give life. I mean, that is the true feminine essence, to be able to connect with that Shakti energy, that life force energy, that true feminine energy, and to create things, to birth them out into the world. And when I talk about procreation and fertility, it's not just making babies, right? We can make anything. We can make any life that we dream of. We can, you know, it's being artistic. It's creating new businesses. It's creating anything and everything. And everyone has this Shakti energy. Everyone has this feminine energy, this life force energy inside them. It doesn't, regardless of gender, right? Gender is out of the equation. It's an energy that when I talk about Shakti, you know, when I talk about feminine energy, that's the ability, we all have that. We all have access to it. So she really is, I mean, the first goddess that we see, the first recorded goddess that, you know, she is this multifaceted being, right? Not only does she rule not only is she queen of heaven and earth, she's agriculture, war, love, sexuality, priestesshood, and diving into the myths and reading more about Sumerian culture, like living in ancient Mesopotamia, the temple was the highest part in the city. The Sumerian temples were basically like large platforms, and they kind of got smaller as they went up. So almost like a pyramid, right? It was just one platform on top of another until you get to the very top where the temple resides. And written language essentially started in the temples. The Sumerian language, the people who, you know, took the time to record all of these myths, all of these hymns, so that we can read them 6,000 years later, which really blows my mind. They were the ones who came up with language, with writing. They had clay tablets and they used reed styluses. And so they wrote down all of these myths, and there's just so much beauty to that. Like I have really enjoyed learning about that this past week. I mean, just as I'm kind of starting to explore, more about Inanna, more than I already knew. I feel like an archaeologist this week. The Greeks were really great at recording too. We have a ton of Greek myths, and they're all really well known. And it always, it makes me sad to know that, we don't have Celtic myths like that. So it's something that, I don't know, I guess I treasure more, knowing how old and how ancient it is. And again, she's the original goddess. She's the OG. She's kind of got it all going for her. And like I said, she knows what she wants and she goes after it. She waited 10 years for that tree to grow in her garden, and again and again asked over and over, where was her throne? Where was her bed? As a goddess of love and sexuality, there's a lot of myths detailing, the art of lovemaking, as her father gifted her. But it's also the copulation of her and her husband. And there's a lot of mentioning of vulvas in this text. But it's honoring that part of the woman, right? That sacredness, that ability to procreate, the ability to fertilize the land, to bring forth what wasn't there before, right? Creating something out of nothing. That essentially that's feminine energy. That's life force energy itself, birthing something from nothing, right? Starting with an idea and turning it into reality. And I love that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to mention this week, but I already feel like the video is slightly longer. So next week, we're definitely going to go into Inanna's descent into the underworld and how she escapes. And it's one of the most well-known myths of Inanna, and you can read it for free online. But there's a lot of symbolism in there. There's a lot of meaning between each gate, and there's a beautiful book I'll be sharing with you next week that kind of goes into more detail. But it's also dealing with our darkness and our shadow sides. So stay tuned for that. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I apologize because I often tend to talk in circles, but I feel like I got the point across. I hope you can walk away from this knowing a little bit more about Inanna, and honoring her as this beautiful ancient deity, right? Who really kind of does have it all. She really is the queen, right? The ruler of both realms. And I'll be sharing some of her common symbols, things that represent her, things that I've come across over and over again in the myths, to kind of help you connect more with her too, or honor her more. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you next week.